Hello and welcome to Choose Your Crown Part 6, The Fall and the Enmity of the Seeds, a supernatural journey through creation, out of the garden, and into eternity. Previously covered on my other parts of this video series were Day 1 of creation and the revelation of the Aleph Tav in Genesis 1:1. That was in Part 1. Part 2 covered the earth, eye, womb matrix and the human body temple. Part 3 covered the gospel of the righteous kingdom, or Melchizedek, which means righteous king. Part 4 covered the creation of mankind and man's tripartite existence. And Part 5 covered why we need deliverance from death due to the original sinner and perverter, Hasatan. Each of these parts have been building up together throughout the series, so if there's any information you need to go back on to better understand where we are at now, please do so. At the beginning of each of these videos, I've gone through the days of creation, and now we're possibly on day 8. And here's my reasoning. Throughout the series, the days of creation have been being followed for their actual day timelines and for their higher significance millennially. This series has already gone through days 1 through 7 of creation, so a day 8 is now being speculated to come next. There is no exact way of knowing, based on scripture, if the fall of Adam actually occurred on day 8, but from time spent in study, it at least occurred after Adam had rested on day 7. I used to lean that the fall of man happened on either day 3 or on day 6, but after much more time spent in study and in prayer over the topic, my understanding comes to it perhaps being on day 8, or at least after day 7. I used to think it was day 3 due to the order of the plants springing up in the garden. And I used to think it was day 6 because 6 is the number of man and beast. But now I'm leaning on day 8. One of the reasons pointing toward day 8 is that the number 8 has to do with new beginnings or a change in time. 8 is the same as the infinity symbol or a time loop. The number 8 is also no different than the number 1 when it comes to a 7-day week cycle because it begins a new week. 8 also represents time looping back around because it is the same perceived shape that the sun and moon's paths make in the sky as their analemmas. In my thinking then, there would have been a perfect 7-day creation week with a rest on the 7th day, and then the fall occurred afterward, bringing on a new time loop where they were brought out of the perfect creation into a lower state of creation. This also helps to explain why the Ouroboros ties in with the infinity symbol. So we have the infinity symbol tying into the Ouroboros and what the sun and moon's paths perceivably look like in the sky. This is not really what their paths are doing. They're really going around in a huge circle. But if you take a time lapse of where they go up in the sky throughout the year as far as they go, and you take photos and time lapse it, you're going to see this analemma shape of how the sun and moon perceivably are in the sky because they're going around above in rings. And these rings have to do with being trapped in time, and they also have to do with the number 8 starting a new time loop. So I hope you can understand that, and you might have to look into that more yourself to better understand it. So perceivably it's making an 8, but they're really making rings. So a ring or an Ouroboros 8 are the same symbol. Also, this is something to note that I didn't make a slide for. A day is as 1,000 years to the Most High. So when Adam and Eve took of the fruit, they were told that they would die within that day. Well, they died within that day, as in they died within the first 1,000 years. So a day can sometimes be 1,000 years, or a 24-hour cycle. So he died within the first 1,000 years. His time was cut. So a lot of people say, oh, well, the Bible lied because Adam didn't die in the day that he ate of the fruit. But he really did. He died within the first 1,000 years. So that's another thing to consider during this study. The fall. Genesis 3:1-6 says this. Now the serpent was more crafty than any living creature of the field which Yahweh Elohim had made. And the serpent said to the woman, Can it really be that Elohim has said, You shall not eat from any tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, We may eat from the fruit of the trees of the garden, except the fruit from the tree which is in the middle of the garden. Elohim said, You shall not eat from it, nor touch it, otherwise you will die. But the serpent said to the woman, You surely will not die, for Elohim knows that on the day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like Elohim, knowing good and evil. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was delightful to look at, and a tree to be desired in order to make one wise and insightful, she took some of its fruit and ate it. So there's a lot to unpack here, and I'm not even sure I unpacked as much as I wanted to in this video. So there's even more to take from this short bit of verses, but I just covered the basics of it. So the serpent was more crafty, or arum, than any other living creature of the field. And serpent in Hebrew is nahash, and has the meaning life strength separated with teeth, which sure does sound like a serpent. The Hebrew word arum is ayin resh wa mem, and this is the same pictographic word as Adam and the woman being naked, except that this definition differs with having the sense of being subtle, shrewd, and deceptive. So Adam and Eve were regularly naked, and the serpent was shrewd and deceptive in his nakedness. So there's two different kinds of nakedness. Actually, there might be three, but we're focusing on two here. So while they were naked, they were without shame or deceit, whereas the serpent was naked and deceitful. So they were just regularly naked. There was no shame to it. There was no deceit to it. But the serpent was naked and deceitful and shrewd and crafty. We can also see that if they were naked as light beings, without shame, that the serpent was a naked light being that was a false light. So, back in my previous videos, I explained that they were made out of dust to be clay beings, but it was more like dust suspended in light. So dust and clay suspended in light would be the best way to describe them. And the serpent was a false light. So they had the covering of Yahweh, which was the real light, but the serpent was naked as a false light because he was deceitful and shrewd. So here's the serpent as a kind of light being. So Nahash serpent is noon or life seed, Aleph strength, Het separate, and Shen teeth consume. So his name can mean, or the serpent can mean life, strength, separated with teeth. And that's what he does. That's what serpents do. They separate our life strength with their teeth. And who is our life strength? Yahuwah is our life strength. So he's trying to separate us from him with his teeth. Okay, so the fall. There's a couple theories on the fall that I have in this video, and it mostly has to do with the trees, because there's a couple of different ways that they can be looked at. But I kind of cover both, and either way, they kind of all merge together anyways, so it doesn't really matter which theory is picked, because they both kind of end up doing the same thing in the end anyhow. So in theory 1, there is one singular tree in the midst of the garden. Okay, this is as if there was one tree there. And the serpent discussed with the woman about what Yahuwah said concerning the eating of the fruit from the midst of the garden. And the woman replied that her and Adam may eat of any of the trees except for the tree which is in the middle of the garden. And think for a moment. In this theory, if there is a dartboard, and how can there be 2 central points on a dartboard? A dartboard only has 1 central point. So this is as if there is one tree there, and it has 1 central point. And the woman replied that they cannot eat from the tree singular in the middle of the garden. So in this theory, you have to ask yourself the question, is it possible that the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life are one and the same? And how could that be possible? And what really is the reason for them not to eat of it if they are the same? Okay? But you have to look at the menorah as the tree of life to gain more insight to understand this. Okay? So we have the woman, and we have the serpent, and we have the menorah. And we're using a scripture from Isaiah for these 7 spirits of the menorah: knowledge, counsel, wisdom, outpouring of the Holy Spirit, or the Ruach, understanding, might, and reverence. But here we have the woman coming up to the tree, and the first branch she comes to is knowledge, kind of like the knowledge of good and evil. But we have the serpent on that branch talking to her. Okay? So keep that image in mind. And then in a previous video, I'm saying, remember the discovery earlier how the adversary propped up a fence of chaos? So he propped up a fence of chaos in front of the screen in order to have control over it. You might have to go back and understand where that comes from. So he acted as a screen or as a high priest for the tabernacle, for like this heavenly sanctuary, but he ended up becoming controlling over it, deciding what gets to come in and come out through trade. So he became like controlling, and he was kind of perverting his job. But you have to go back to the video that discusses that to better understand what I mean. So if that same sort of situation is applied to the Genesis 3 narrative, it can be viewed that the serpent made that same kind of fence prop up for the woman. So he always puts up fences of chaos in front of how people screen their mind. So, and remember this, Yahweh tests the inner parts of mankind, but Yahweh himself does not tempt. And there is a scripture for that. I did not put it here, but I should have. Temptation comes from something that is already within someone, from their own impure desires. Yahweh can test to see if someone will follow his instruction, but whether or not they listen or are tempted to not listen to his instruction comes from within that individual. So temptation comes from within yourself. Yahweh wanted to have Adam and the woman listen to him out of their own will to listen, in order to prove that they could earn their divinity, or their eyes being opened by supernatural awareness in maturity. Because the whole thing that was pivotal to this was their eyes being opened. So there was something with their eyes in the garden that we're trying to figure out here. And we're thinking that it has to do with supernatural awareness. But Yahweh probably wanted them to earn it in maturity and go through like the steps of being in the Ruach. Whereas Hasatan, or the serpent, kind of gave Eve a quick way to do it not in maturity. That's kind of the thinking here for theory 1. So there is a part of the human brain called the reticular activation system that sifts through copious amounts of information and only filters what is important to that individual. So we all have this part of the brain, and it helps us to filter the information in the world through the parameters of the individual. So whatever is important to us, we're gonna notice those things more than things that are unimportant to us. In other words, the reticular activation system works in similar fashion to what the adversary's first job used to be. So if his job was to have things come into the heavenly sanctuary, he would have to filter and who could come through and all that. And what we're saying is that part of the brain is kind of acting similar to that. It filters through what's important to us to come in to our mind. So it is up to the woman to decide if she wants information of Yahweh's instructions to be the important thing that she listens to, or the words of the serpent to be the important thing that she listens to. So what I'm saying is, her part of her brain, her reticular activation system, gets to sift through and choose what's important to her. So she's either choosing Yahweh's instructions are important for her to listen to, or she's going to choose that the serpent's words are important for her to listen to come into her mind, which will then lead to what her actions are. But the woman decided she would listen to the serpent and take the fruit from the tree of knowledge and good and evil, or to go ahead and take the fruit of the knowledge right away, instead of listening to the instructions of Yahweh to not take from it and to not even go near it. So she chose to grab for knowledge without the knowledge being balanced with the reverence of Yahweh, because that same branch couples and balances with reverence. So she didn't have reverence for Yahweh to listen to him, so she went ahead and just grabbed that fruit. And if she had reverence for Yahweh, she would have listened to him and not take it at all. So, being the archetype of the human soul, so also in a previous video in this series, we looked at the tripartite man and how man has a spirit, a soul, and a body, and how the soul part of Adam was taken from his ribs to be the woman. And so she is the archetype. She's an archetype of the human soul. So she still has herself a spirit, a soul, and a body. But she's an archetype of the human soul, like a symbology of it. So the emotional side, the will, mind, and emotions. So she chose to give in to the desires she already had within her. And this was the desire to be divine. Although, if she would have waited, she would have been granted her divinity properly. Because Yahweh did have the ability to give her that with the tree of life. It was there for a purpose. She just would have had to wait. Or perhaps she was already granted it and she was lied to and told as though she wasn't granted it. Either way, she was deceived. So whether she already had her divinity and the serpent lied to her and was telling her as though she didn't, or if she just had to maturely wait for it, either way she was lied to. Yahweh wants our inner divine nature to be ignited by his instruction. So our inner divine nature is supposed to be ignited by his word and instruction, and not by following our own desire to have divine nature. So are we going to gain our divine nature through his instruction? Or do we just want to say, nah, we're just going to go for it ourselves without him? Yahweh knew that if the fruit of knowledge of good and evil was not manifested with reverence for him, that they would experience the two forms of death. So, meaning their soul and their body would die. And the serpent also knew this. Okay, this is theory 2. So it's not that much different from theory 1 for the most part. Theory 2 is only if there really were two individual trees in the midst of the garden. So before it was as if there was one, and we're just looking at the knowledge part, a knowledge branch. But now it's as if there really were two trees. Okay? And we kind of need to look at the setup of the sanctuary, the heavenly tabernacle, which is also reflective in the Garden of Eden, which is also reflective in the wilderness tabernacle. They all have the same parts. So the midst of the garden would have been like the Holy of Holies. The Garden of Eden itself, so that like the whole garden in general, would be the holy place. The land of Eden, so the whole entire land of Eden, not just the garden, would have been the court outside. And then the whole land, even further outside of Eden, the land of Nod, would have been completely outside of the court. Okay? So, and then you can imagine that there were two trees in the Holy of Holies. The two high priests, like I've said before. Yahusha being the true high priest, and then the serpent being the high priest that got pretty much fired. Fired from being the high priest for being a perverter. But they were both in the Holy of Holies as trees to take from. Okay, so here's another image for the garden, or the whole thing of Eden, and east of Eden was the land of Nod. So east of Eden, if you're looking east first, is the land of Nod. And then the entrance to the court, or the land of Eden, would be where you enter. And this is also why Cain was told sin was lying at the door, because it was right at that entrance. And then there was the land of Eden, and there was the altar of Cain and Abel, which was just like the basins and stuff that would have been in the outer court of the wilderness tabernacle. And then you have the two cherubim for the actual entering of the temple to the holy place. So they're blocking it with the time prison with the two swords. So you have to be able to enter through the narrow gate between the cherubim to get into the garden or the holy place, but they were kicked out of it. And then the midst of the garden would have been the Holy of Holies, and perhaps there were two trees, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And Eve went into the midst of the garden, and she took from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, even though Yahusha, or the tree of life, would have been in there too. And so was her husband. Her husband was with her in the midst. So she would have seen the tree of life. She would have seen Adam there with her, and she would have decided against both of them and take from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Okay? So here's the fall. Theory 2, some more. So theory 2 is the idea that the woman partook of a tree that was entirely separate from the tree of life and mingled herself with that tree by taking its fruit. So it was not just that she grabbed for knowledge without reverence, as though it were one single tree, but that she grabbed from an entirely different fruit of knowledge. Trees can be likened to people, and fruit to their inward character. So perhaps the two trees really were Yahusha and Hasatan. Some can even take the idea as far as to say that the woman took part in an intimate relationship with the serpent instead of choosing to be in an intimate relationship with the ruler of the tree of life, Yahusha. Either way, she chose to partake in fruit that she was told not to take part of because she was tempted by another word. So she chose to listen to another word. And the woman chose the word that was important for her to listen to. And she chose the tree crown. So she chose what crown she wanted. That's what this whole series is about, is choosing your crown. She chose the tree crown that leads to death. And here's an image I found on the internet of what someone made of the tree of life, having the fruits of the Spirit: faith, joy, love, peace, meekness, goodness, temperance, and saying that that's like the spirit of Yahweh, or that tree would have been Yahusha himself, the tree of life, and then the tree of knowledge of good and evil would have been Hasatan's tree, which has competition, human reasoning, vanity, disharmony, envy, jealousy, strife, fornication. So all the fruits of the flesh were on his tree. So it's one way to think of it, as if there were two trees. Okay, so either way, she chose to partake of a word that was out of her flesh, whether or not there was actually one tree or whether there were two trees. She wasn't listening to Yahweh's instruction. And the fruits are different when you don't listen to his instruction. So that's the bottom line. And I had this first picture on the left in one of my other videos in this series, but I'm using it again to explain the trees and what I meant with the Ouroboros earlier. So if we start from the bottom, you have the physical realm, which is the earth itself, and it has 3 physical dimensions. It's ruled by time, which is the birth and death, the Ouroboros, and it's ruled by principalities from the spiritual realm. So you have to always, always, always on earth test the spirits, because not every spirit is from Yahuwah. And I should have put that scripture in here too. So that's earth. And above earth, we have the Milky Way, or what we understand as being the Milky Way. And it is a big ring over the earth. And that ring is the Ouroboros, and it is the snake eating its tail as the ring over the earth, because he is the ruler of this world. And the Bible even says many times that Hasatan, or the serpent, is the ruler over earth. Not Yahuwah. Yahuwah is not the ruler of earth yet. But right now, Hasatan is the ruler of this world, earth. Okay, and then you go up a level, and you have you have the spiritual realm, which is in the lower order of the flesh, the kingdom of darkness. So this is when you have the 2 eyes of good and evil, the spinning eyes, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So you have the 2 spinning eyes, and they're spinning because they are in time. They're stuck in time because of the 2 cherubim spinning their swords to keep you away from the actual heaven for those who can't get in. And so they have the 2 spinning swords, the star spin, which is also the veil that keeps you from entering into the sanctuary. So the 2 eyes are the seemingly good path, so like the Luciferic path, the false light, and then the seemingly or obviously evil path, so things that are considered actually dark and satanic. And then you have the Luciferic path that tricks you into thinking they oppose each other, but they really don't. They're one and the same, these 2 eyes. And then for those who do get to enter the narrow path by not falling for the false light and not falling for obviously dark things, you get into the narrow path of righteousness through Yahuwah, and only his spirit in Yahusha can guide you down the narrow path. You're not gonna figure it out without him. You're gonna be stuck in one of these 2 spinning eyes without him. And the Shamayim, or heaven, is I would think it's still because it's outside of time and it's stationary. And when he actually first made the earth, it was all stationary. Everything is described as being still and stationary. But I think when Adam and Eve got kicked out, that was when some kind of weird time loop began with the stars spinning. Because I think before they were all stationary. All right, the fall. So now we're asking, what about Adam? And this is my theory on Adam. So I could be wrong. You can study this on your own, but this is my theory on Adam. What about Adam? Genesis 2, 6 through 7. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. Okay, so all we know was that he was with her. So we don't know if she just disregarded him and then gave him some, and he was just like, okay, I'll take it because you did, or whatever. But in the end, he took some too, and he was with her, and that's all we know. Because it's a very short sentence. So, my theory is the woman took the fruit as a type of soul giving in to the temptation of its desires. Because remember, she's the archetype of the will, knowledge, of emotions, will, mind, and emotions. Yeah, she's the soul part of Adam. She's the archetype of it. Because she was removed from him. But Adam himself, because he is the archetype of the spirit which is above the soul, he had a more honorable reason for taking the fruit. You see, since Adam is the archetype of the spirit part of mankind, Adam was one with Yahweh's instruction, even though the woman was not. Because the woman took the fruit without any care that a vessel of Yahweh's was near her. So she disregarded Adam. She was not in submission to him. She disregarded that the tree of life was there. She disregarded Yahweh's instruction. So she chose not to be in subjection to Adam in her choice, or to Yahweh. So the soul part of humankind only makes decisions within Yahweh's will if it is in subjection to the spirit. So if she would have been in subjection to Yahweh's spirit, or Adam being an archetype for that, she would have listened. But she didn't. But perhaps Adam ate of the fruit that she gave to him so that he could be like a Melchizedek Messiah archetype and go down with the woman. So just like how Yahusha came down to earth to die our death, so he took his bride's position to be with her. Maybe Adam did the same thing. Maybe Adam took his wife's position, his bride's position, in order to be with her, just like Yahusha later did. So Adam filled the role of truth, or Yahusha, so that the woman could experience mercy. Because Proverbs 16:6 says, "By mercy and truth iniquity is purged, and by the fear of Yahweh men depart from evil. So perhaps, and this is just my theory, perhaps Adam chose to go down with his wife, his bride, so that she would not have gone down alone. Just like how Yahusha, our Messiah, chose to come down and die the same death Adam did to be with his bride. Just a thought. So, the display of truth and mercy that Adam made by partaking in the fruit with her was the reason why mankind was made. So track here. Because mercy and truth purge iniquity. So perhaps mankind were created so that by us experiencing mercy and truth from Yahweh, the original iniquity caused by Hasatan would be purged by one of Adam's very own descendants, for the actual truth and mercy to come from Yahusha as one of Adam's very own descendants, so that we can purge that original iniquity, to get rid of it, to make it no more. What if that's what humans were made for? And this makes humans very special, because first, they had to be made in Elohim's image, unlike any other being. And then they were to be made for the purpose to be able to feel Yahweh's truth and mercy to eventually remove iniquity forever. Okay, maybe I'm taking that too deep, but you know, what else would our purpose be? Were we created so that we could experience mercy and truth and purge iniquity? The original one that we didn't even do? The very original? Psalm 89, 11 through 18. The heavens are yours, the earth also is yours. The world and all its fruit and all its fullness, you have founded them. The north and the south, you have created them. Tabor and Hermon rejoice in your name. You have a mighty arm. Strong is your hand, and high is your right hand. Righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. Mercy and truth go before your face. Blessed are the people who know the joyful sound. They walk, O Yahweh, in the light of your countenance. In your name they rejoice all day long, and in your righteousness they are exalted. For you are the glory of their strength, and in your favor our horn is exalted. For our shield belongs to Yahweh, and our King to the Holy One of Israel. Hallelujah. Blessed be Yahweh. Okay, so more on the fall. And I put that psalm there because, you know, I want to praise Yahweh, but also it mentioned the mercy and truth. And that's just a big thing to wrap your mind around, so I just want to give him praise for that. Anyways, the fall. Adam and the woman's eyes were opened. Okay? There could be so much more to this, especially with the earth eye womb matrix and how it all ties in with the eyes. And yeah, you could take this so many different directions, but their eyes were opened, and this was a change in mental capacity, so not just physiology, but also mental capacity, because this whole thing had to do with divinity somehow. So rather than having spiritual eyes that only knew to walk with Yahweh in the garden, their eyes became physical eyes that could give them a different awareness of their surroundings. So they had changed awareness of what being naked was and now became ashamed, or bosh. Their insides attached to chaos, which is what bosh means, which is what ashamed means. So within them became attached to chaos because they got a different idea of what being naked was. And perhaps even they became less vibrant as light beings, because remember, I kind of described them before as being dust suspended in light. And maybe now it gained density to have them be more dull. So if you think of dust being less dense, it floats and it can suspend in light. And then when it's compacted together like dirt, it's more dense and more dull. So I'm wondering if that's kind of what happened with their bodies then. And then the transfiguration, or the second coming, maybe will be suspended in light, but in a more glorious way again. So, anyways, that's just one thought on it. So rather than this kind of awareness being an upgrade to their existence, right? Because the serpent deceived her. He made it sound like it would be an upgrade, but it was really a stripping and a downgrade. Whatever happened to her and him. She was deceived into thinking it would be an upgrade. Which, how can you get a better upgrade from already being suspended in light and walking with Yahweh in the garden? But it was really a downgrade and a stripping. Because she was lied to. They went from being naked, aram, so like regularly naked, and compared to light even, because aram can be similar to the word or, which is the Hebrew word for light, to being so there are 3 different kinds of naked, my bad. Okay, so they went from being naked, aram, and compared to or, to being just plainly naked, eram. Okay, so there are a few different words for naked, and the serpent's one was the one that's for shrewdness. Anyways, you'd have to look at all the Strong's numbers in each text and write them next to each other to figure out which naked goes for which scenario. But in other words, they lost Yahweh's light as their covering, right? So they went from being dust kind of like suspended in light because it was Yahweh's light, and then they were given, maybe they became more dense, and then they were actually naked, and they were ashamed of that because they lost their light covering, and then they went to cover themselves with fig leaves, and then Yahweh gave them actual garments of skin to cover them. But that'll be covered in the next video, part 7 of this series. Okay, so now here's more on the fall. Genesis 3, 8 through 15. Then the man and his wife heard the voice of Yahweh Elohim walking in the garden in the breeze of the day. And they hid themselves from the presence of Yahweh Elohim among the trees of the garden. But Yahweh Elohim called out to the man, "Where are you?" I heard your voice in the garden, he replied, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid myself. Who told you you were naked? Asked Yahweh Elohim. Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you not to eat? And the man answered, The woman whom you gave me, she gave me fruit from the tree, and I ate it. Then Yahweh Elohim said to the woman, What is this you have done? The serpent deceived me, she replied, and I ate. Yahweh Elohim said to the serpent, Because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and above all beasts of the field. On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Okay, so Adam ate of the fruit that Eve gave him. Well, she wasn't named Eve yet. The woman gave him, and he blamed her even. So he should have took responsibility. I can say that for sure. He should have just taken responsibility and said, she gave it to me, but I did choose to eat it, right? Because that would have been responsible. But no, instead he blames her entirely. And she turns around and points at the serpent like, he deceived me. So nobody here is taking responsibility. They're just pointing fingers to the next one, right? When really she should have taken responsibility for being deceived, and Adam should have taken responsibility for taking the fruit from her, right? But no, instead they each point a finger down to the next one, which probably made things even worse for them, right? And Yahweh didn't even give the serpent a chance to speak because he had heard enough, and he just said, Because you have done this, you are cursed, right? Okay, so the first punishment. Right, okay, so the serpent was given the first punishment because he deceived, because he was the one talking to the woman in the first place. So the first punishment that is given for the transgression was to the serpent. It doubled as punishment and prophecy. So prophecy is a foretelling of future events. And the serpent went from being a long, slender, dragon-like creature, right, with legs, because the serpent did have legs before, to the animal known today as a snake. And sadly enough, I do have to put this. This by no means snakes themselves are evil. Because there are a lot of people, I have met some Christians who like just think snakes themselves are evil, and it's like, well, they're animals. Like, they're not supernatural beings. They themselves are not evil. They're just animals, right? We need to think of things allegorically too here, not just think snakes themselves are having some kind of evilness to them. No, they're not the safest creatures to be around, and they have no feelings towards you, so that part's true, but that doesn't mean we need to go around hurting them or killing them or anything. Some of them. So we must understand the difference between the natural realm and the supernatural. Snakes as a normal animal can very well be dangerous, but not all of them are, and they all have their due places in their ecosystems. Except, of course, if you're in certain parts of the world where they are invasive, like pretty sure anacondas, like in Florida and stuff. Yeah, then you're gonna want people to take them out because they're not supposed to be in that ecosystem, ruining it. but that's a whole nother topic. One of the prophetic punishments of the serpent was to eat dust all the days of its life. And remember, this is a supernatural instance because we know that real snakes do not eat dust, right? So we need to separate ourselves from that. It means that this serpent, the cosmic serpent, will go after mankind as beings made from the dust and constantly try to consume them. So it's kind of like our hunter, right? It's coming after us because we're made out of dust, and it will constantly try to consume the dust that we're made out of, or consume us and take us down. It is also the first time that the idea of time and lifespan comes up, with the serpent being placed as part of the prism of time. So within time, there is death and a ruler over it, right? So that would be the serpent, because it's going after the dust to consume it, meaning there will be death now, right? And there's now a ruler over death. The Ouroboros is the symbol of the serpent's demise, also being its new beginning. And yes, that is allowed to give you chills, because that's really creepy. But eventually, the Ouroboros, the snake, the serpent, death itself will be destroyed forever. It's already been conquered over by what Messiah did. He already conquered death, but it's still allowed to exist until he comes back and finally gets rid of it entirely. But yeah, it's allowed to give you the chills that the moment the serpent was given a curse was also its new beginning. That is creepy. Okay, so the enmity of the seeds. Okay, so if that part of the prophecy gave you chills, you better be sitting down for this part. So there was enmity placed between the serpent and the woman. The woman is not only Hava or Eve, but also the main women who bear the seed line of the righteous descendant Yahusha. So Hava, and then Sarah is a big one, Rebecca, Rachel, any woman who has been involved, even Ruth. So any woman who's been involved in his descending seed line to secure that seed line. The serpent has enmity against the woman. The woman is not only Rachel or Sarah or any of those women, but it's can even be the bride, it's herself, the seeds that come after he was bared, to be his bride. That's also his woman, right? That the serpent will come after. Okay, so Matthew 13:24-30, here's a parable. Another parable he put forth to them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. But when the grain had sprouted and produced a crop, the tares also appeared. So the servants of the owner came and said to him, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares? He said to them, An enemy has done this. The servants said to him, Do you want us then to go and gather them up? But he said, No, lest while you gather up the tares you also uproot the wheat with them. So let them both grow together until the harvest. And at the time of the harvest I will say to the reapers, First gather the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. Okay, this is the parable. The wheat are Yahweh's people, whether native born and grafted in or whether grafted in. Okay? We're his wheat. And the tares are the seeds of the enemy, or those who walk in their flesh and are against those who are of the Spirit. Okay? Because if you go back to that one picture, which had the two trees, the tree of knowledge of good and evil had all of the fruits of the flesh on it. And the tree of the life had all the fruits of the Spirit on it. And this is the wheat and the tares. And the tares, they're allowed to grow among the wheat, and you can hardly tell them apart. But they'll be bundled first to be burned, right? Because in Revelation, we know that they'll be in the fire of Gehenna. And the wheat will be gathered to Yahusha, right? So that's how you decrypt that parable. So wheat and tares are nearly identical until the time for harvest, when the wheat bows down and the tares remain standing, because otherwise you can't tell the difference. The parable is saying that all those that are not bowing down to the Messiah will be plucked up and burnt, while those that are bowing down will be gathered together. So if you're bowing down to him, you're going to be gathered to him. And the ones that are standing upright on their own because they're prideful and in their flesh, they'll be burned. The two seed lines will be nearly impossible to tell apart until it's the end times harvest, unless, of course, you know them by their fruit, like I just explained. And a hint is that the tares are those who are of the flesh, and the wheat are those who are of the set-apart spirit, right? That's easy. The enmity of the seeds again. So, the descendant of the prophecy, Yahusha, will crush the serpent's head, and he did that at Golgotha. He crushed, because that's what Golgotha means. It means the skull. He crushed the serpent's head, putting it to an official end, but not until after the serpent lands a blow at the heel. So, technically, Yahusha's heels were staked, but also, there's something more to that. Heel in Hebrew is akeb, ayin kaf bet, which means to see the back or end part of something. And the heel contains, right, your foot, your heel contains dead skin that are so insensitive that it cannot feel anything of significance. At the same time, that which is totally insignificant and trivial, like tickling that part of the foot, you can feel it. So this is an accurate description of the last generation. They are totally insensitive to hard reality, but they are devoid of understanding or feeling, yet are very much in tune with that which is superfluous, transient, and meaningless. Right? That's what they care about, is meaningless stuff. And the end part, or heel, here is then describing the final generation on earth. And this is a generation that will be struck by the serpent. Okay? And the book of Daniel also speaks about the final generation being feet made out of iron and clay through an interpretation of King Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Okay? Daniel 2:40 through 45. And there shall be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things. And like iron that crushes, it shall break and crush all these. And as you saw the feet and toes partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, It shall be a divided kingdom. But some of the firmness of iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with the soft clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. As you saw the iron mixed with soft clay, so they will mix with one another in the seed of men. But they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of those kings, the Elohim of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever. Just as you saw that a stone was cut from a mountain by no human hand, and it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the silver, the clay, and the gold. A great Elohim has made known to the king what shall be after this. Okay, so it's kind of describing, Nebuchadnezzar's dream is describing a huge statue made out of layers of different materials, which are the kingdoms of the earth, like Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. It's so time frames of the kingdoms of earth, reigning at different times. And there'll be one made out of iron and clay when there are wheat and tares growing together, right? But at the end, at the very end, Yahweh will bring it to its demise because it'll be something not made with human hands that destroys it. So that'll be Yahweh himself, or Yahusha. And so consider the two fangs of a snake striking the last generation to make them iron mixed with clay. So people are made out of clay, as we went over, made out of dust. That's like dense. And clay would be like technology or things that strengthen it. And this final blow of the serpent will make the final generation crumble at the return of Messiah, coming to crush the serpent's head in finality. So this is when he comes to crush it, right? In finality. So he already did crush it at Golgotha, and then he'll do it in finality after that generation gets struck by the serpent. So a lot to think about if you haven't studied this yet yourself. And here's more on the enmity of the seeds. Genesis 3:16 through 19. To the woman he said, I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be toward your husband, but he shall rule over you. And to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you. And you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground. For out of it you are taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. And though the woman's descendant will crush the serpent's head, she will meanwhile have to bring forth children in pain, right? Because she has to bear the seeds. And recall the woman being the archetype of a soul, and read in 1 Corinthians 15 again. 1 Corinthians 15:42 through 49. What is sown is perishable, it is raised imperishable. It is sown in dishonor, it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, it is raised in power. It is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. If there is a natural body, there is also a spiritual body. So it is written, the first man Adam became a living being, the last Adam a life-giving spirit. The spiritual, however, was not first, but the natural, and then the spiritual. The first man was of the dust of the earth, and the second man was from heaven. As was the earthly man, so also are those who are of the earth. And as is the heavenly man, so also are those who are of heaven. And just as we have borne the likeness of the earthly man, so also shall we bear the likeness of the heavenly man. Right, so Adam, whether or not his dust really was suspended in light, he was still made from earthly dust, right? That is not as glorious as the one that really is from the heavens. Yahusha would be the man made from the dust of heaven, the actual dust of heaven. And we want to bear his likeness in the end. That's the end goal. We want to be transformed to bear the likeness of the heavenly man. And this is also how Yahusha was able to come to earth in human likeness and be born through Miriam as a virgin, because his dust is from heaven, right? So he didn't need to have a physical father with earthly dust to go into the woman. No, he only had to have the Spirit do it, because it's an entirely different kind of dust. It's not the same at all, because it's from the heavens. So that's kind of how he was able to be conceived by a spirit, by his own spirit from the Father, Heavenly Father, right? And it makes a lot more sense than as if it were earthly dust bringing forth seed. So just something to think about. But he also took on the resemblance of the earthly dust, right? But he also is not really from the earthly dust, but he became to resemble it, and then he put on his glory after, and we want to put on that same glory. So that's a little bit on that. Right, bearing fruit from the seed of life. So, as shown earlier in Genesis 2, a soul is a nephesh. To be a nephesh means to be a vessel that holds the neshama, the spirit. The neshama is the breath of Yahweh, or the seed that needs broken down in water in order to grow. Right? So Yahweh's own breath needs a womb, just like how I was explaining with Miriam or Mary being a womb, right? So his own breath is the seed that needs broken down in water to give life or breath. So his spirit comes into us too and needs broken down the same exact way. The root word of neshama is nasham, and it means to blast or to pant as though in labor. And this points to needing to bear the fruit of the Spirit, right? So in the natural, just like with Miriam, women bear children when they are inseminated, and the child grows inside the waters of the womb, right? That's natural child, how a child comes to be in the womb. You have to be inseminated one way or another. And in the spiritual, the soul bears the fruit of the Spirit when it grasps the seed of the Word and goes through living waters. Okay? And even the earth itself bears witness to this because it is like a giant womb in waters. So, if I have told you earthly things and you do not believe, how can you believe if I tell you heavenly things? Is something that was said in John 3:12. Okay, so here's more on bearing fruit from the seed of life. 1 Peter 3:18 through 22. For Messiah also suffered for sins once for all, the righteous for the unrighteous, to bring you to Elohim. He was put to death in the body, but made alive in the spirit, in whom he also went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison, who disobeyed long ago when Elohim waited patiently in the days of Noah while the ark was being built. In the ark, a few people, only 8 souls, were saved through water. And this water symbolizes the baptism that now saves you also. Not the removal of dirt from the body, but the pledge of a clear conscience toward Elohim, through the resurrection of Yahusha HaMashiach, who has gone into heaven and is at the right hand of Elohim, with angels, authorities, and powers subject to him. Okay, so there's a lot there. So think about it. The waters that filled the inside of the womb to lift Noah in an ark, right? The ark is kind of like also a womb too, that had things inside of it, seed inside of it, animals that would later bear more. And it was because it was a type of baptism, all the earth filling with water. And the ones who disobeyed were the ones that got taken out by the flood, right? Or, yeah, kind of that has to do with when the fallen angels came and made the Nephilim, and that was the part of one of the reasons for the flood, along with violence, right? That all needed to be destroyed. But the baptism itself were the waters that cleansed everything, right? It was about removing all of that violence, all of that corruption, and to bring forth a clean slate. Okay? That was the whole point of the story of Noah, was about removing unrighteousness and bringing forth a clean slate, which is really what the rainbow covenant was about too, right? Like, I won't do this again, kind of promise, but also it was about that clean slate being brought forth, even though it did get corrupted again, right? Anyways, that's a whole nother topic. I'm not trying to get off topic with this, but baptism, the purpose of baptism or immersion is not to remove dirt off of the physical body, right? Like when you get baptized, it's not because you're getting physical dirt off of you. I mean, that's what an actual bath is for. But a baptism is to pledge to have a clear conscience or spirit toward Yahweh. It's to get a clean slate towards him, right? And baptism comes from the Greek word baptisma, which means dipping or sinking as a result of something. So the suffix ma at the end of baptisma is the part that makes it a result of something. So that is to say, the result of sincere repentance, right? Because it's about getting a clean slate, so you have to have repentance in order to have a clean slate for it to never happen again. The Greek word baptizo means to immerse and comes from the Greek word bapto, meaning to dip or die. So you're dipping as a result of something, getting a clean conscience, repenting, and the dip or die takes us back to Adam, whose name means red dyed because he was made from clay. So that's cool how that all ties in together. And Adam is to be placed in a natural placement of rulership over the woman because the soulish parts of our nature are supposed to be in subjection to the spirit, right? Because women are an archetype of the soul, even though we do have an inner spirit, and men are an archetype of the spirit, even though they also have souls themselves. So, but women will desire to want to control their husband, okay? You shouldn't want your soul to want to be in control over your spirit. Your spirit needs to be its covering, just as the husband needs to be the covering of the wife. And she has to work really hard to not want to place herself above him, just as much as the soul needs to work really hard to not want to place itself above the spirit. Okay? Bearing fruit from the seed of life. Some more on this. Romans 8, 5 through 8. Those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit set their minds on the things of the Spirit. The mind of the flesh is death, but the mind of the Spirit is life and peace, because the mind of the flesh is hostile to Elohim. It does not submit to Elohim's instruction, nor can it do so. Those controlled by the flesh cannot please Elohim. Right? That's pretty straightforward. That shouldn't be that hard to get. Because Adam took part in eating the fruit with the woman, the earth became cursed on his behalf. This then made the earth have to be worked in order to grow food for mankind, because it otherwise grows thorns and thistles where it is allowed to be overgrown. So places where the earth overgrows and isn't worked, it has all kinds of thorns and thistles and weeds and vines and things that you have to get through. And when Yahusha had the crown of thorns placed on him, that was his part in undoing the curse of the ground, and even the whole of creation awaits to be brought back out of the curse in full. So the crown of thorns was to kind of reverse that, right? To show that things will be reversed on Adam's behalf. Romans 8, 18 through 27. I consider that our present sufferings are not comparable to the glory that will be revealed in us. The creation waits in eager expectation for the revelation of the sons of Elohim. For the creation was subjected to futility, not by its own will, but because of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay and brought into the glorious freedom of the children of Elohim. We know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until the present time. Not only that, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we were saved. But hope that is seen is no hope at all. Who hopes for what he can already see? But if we hope for what we do not yet see, we wait for it patiently. In the same way, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. For we do not know how we ought to pray, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us with groans too deep for words. And he who searches our hearts knows the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints according to the will of Elohim. Okay, so the creation itself wants to be set free from its bondage, as from when it got cursed too, from all of this. And I cannot wait for the new creation, because it's our Earth is already beautiful as it is as a creation, but even the Earth is groaning to be something more, and we are groaning to be something more, and we hope for that, and Yahweh's Spirit assures us that we will have it, but we have to wait patiently. And all of this is also linked into groaning and birth. Okay? So, even the earth groans in the pains of childbirth. Just as the neshama just as the neshama and neshams are groans in us to intercede for what we need. And so, if the soul allows the neshama to be watered and bear the fruit of the Spirit, it will be saved. And here I have Yahusha on the tree of life, or the menorah, wearing the crown of thorns, reversing everything, or securing the reversal of everything, right? Okay, so 1 Timothy 2:13 through 15. For Adam was formed first, and then Eve. And it was not Adam who was deceived, but the woman who was deceived and fell into transgression. Women, however, will be saved through childbearing if they continue in faith, love, and holiness with self-control. So, this isn't about being harsh toward women. This is about the very crucial role women play in bearing seed and raising seed. The more that women bear offspring and raise them to be inclined to the set-apart spirit, the more that the heavenly seed line through Messiah promised to Abraham will come to fruition. Right? So this is all about bearing seed and it coming forth. And men get the part of working the earth because it was also cursed. And women got the part of bearing seed. Okay, so thank you for viewing Choose Your Crown Part 6, a supernatural journey through creation, out of the garden, and into eternity.